3, 2.
Hello, readers, to our first meeting of Books at the Bar. This is a virtual meeting, but hopefully we will be back able to meet together in person within a month or two. The book that I am presenting today is the first book that we selected, which was Giver of the Stars by Jojo Moyes. Jojo Moyes studied at Royal Holloway University of London. She won a bursary, which I assume is a scholarship, financed by the independent newspaper to study journalism at City University. And subsequently, she worked for the Independent for 10 years. In 2001, she became a full-time novelist. Her first novel, Foreign Fruit, won the Romantic Novelist Association's Novel of the Year in 2004. She is married to journalist Charles Arthur and has 3 children. Now, what you may or may not know about this book is it has come under a fair amount of controversy. The controversy has to do with the accusation of plagiarism. She's been accused of plagiarizing from a book called The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. I'm going to read to you that my first way of learning about this was somebody who reviewed the book said that, quote, "I won't be buying this book and you probably won't publish this post, but it needs to be said that JoJo's blatant lifting of scenes and situations is plagiarism at the highest level. After reading The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, and then reading the BuzzFeed article showing the lifted passages, I am appalled. She didn't even change the name of the characters." Readers, take note. This is what happens in the publishing industry when a famous author gets wind of a totally unique story from an emerging author and changes just enough to put it out under their name. Then the publicity engine starts working, and the author who spent years of research developing the story gets pushed aside for the big name with star power and a big promotional budget. Jojo, you could at least have changed the names of the characters. Lazy. There is an article about this. It's the title of the whatever this is coming from is Literature Lust, and the article is Conflict in Book World by Melissa Gowdy, and it talks about this particular controversy. Kim Mitchell Richardson was the author of The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, who is questioning the authenticity of Jojo Moyes' most recent book, The Giver of the Stars. This article illustrates the timeline for both books, and it's very suspicious. However, that aside, we did read for this club the book, and so let me go to that next. The synopsis of this book is that Alice Wright, who's an Englishwoman, marries handsome American Bennett Van Cleve, hoping to escape her stifling life in England. But small-town Kentucky quickly proves equally claustrophobic, especially living alongside her overbearing father-in-law. So when a call goes out for a team of women to deliver books as part of Eleanor Roosevelt's new traveling library, Alice signs on enthusiastically. The leader and soon Alice's greatest ally is Marjorie, a smart-talking, self-sufficient woman who's never asked a man's permission for anything. They will be joined by 3 other singular women who become known as the Pack Horse Librarians of Kentucky. And I have some information about that. The Pack Horse Library. What happens to them and to the men they love becomes an unforgettable drama of loyalty, justice, humanity, and passion. These heroic women refuse to be cowed by men or by convention, and though they face all kinds of dangers in a landscape that is at times breathtakingly beautiful, at others brutal, they're committed to their job, bringing books to people who have never had any, arming them with facts that will change their lives. Just a minute. I want to tell you a little bit about the Horseback Librarians of Kentucky. If you did not have an opportunity to read this book, but you're watching this video, the Horseback Librarians of Kentucky was one of the projects set up by the WPA, a New Deal agency established as an attempt to provide work for victims of the Great Depression. In this case, women who could ride horses or mules set up the equivalent of a mobile library and offered books and reading materials to their neighbors, reaching even those who lived deep in the mountains, too far and too busy to regularly visit the town. In an area as beautiful as it was poor, and it seems it still remains fairly poor and under-resourced, the levels of literacy were minimal, and the librarians went beyond the simple delivering of books, becoming a lifeline to many of the families they regularly visited. Although I had read about the WPA and some of their projects, I wasn't particularly knowledgeable about this project. Apparently, the librarians delivered books. They would frequently read to those who were illiterate, and they provided a connection to a community for people who were very far flung. And in rural Kentucky, that was a lot of people. One of the things that they did have to be concerned about was encountering stills. Moonshiners were active in those parts of Kentucky and very hostile to anybody coming in contact with them. So that was one of the obstacles that they encountered. In the book, Alice, who is the English woman, married to get away from her life in England, only to find herself in a cold relationship in America, far from everything that she knows and understands, until she volunteers to join this newly established traveling library. I found the description of her marriage strange, and when you get to the end of it, one of the concluding statements that gets her more or less out of the marriage is that they never consummated the marriage, which leads me to have some question about the young man she married. However, as soon as they officially get divorced, he's off with another woman, so who knows. Anyway, she finds the oddballs of her small community, and they form an unlikely friendship group. This library opens a new world and appreciation of reading to the children and to the people living in that surrounding area. This book also highlights how reading affects people in a positive way giving hope, comfort, the power to make informed decisions. It was a privilege to read, which is something we very much take for granted. Had we been able to have a discussion of this book, one of the first things that I usually like to address is, what did you think about Alice? And solicit comments from people about their opinion of this young woman. She leaves one kind of life for a remarkably similar life. I think she thought she was going to be in some glamorous place like New York or Philadelphia, and she finds herself in the hills of Kentucky with a man whose father-in-law is very overbearing, very unkind to her. So I would have enjoyed hearing other people's points of view about Alice, but moving on. The next person that I think was a central figure in this story was Marjorie. Now, she was tough as nails. She had a soft spot for the other librarians, I think especially Alice, but I would have, how do we do this digitally? I would like to have had us discuss her background that shaped who she became. It shaped her because her family was a screwball family, not accepted in that area, which is a similarity to the book she's accused of plagiarizing from, because the head librarian there is what was known as a blueskin in Kentucky. That's another subject. We can talk about that when we get together. But at any rate, she had a man named Sven who was in love with her and who was willing to put up with her idiosyncrasies. But the question was, why do you think she was so resistant to marrying Sven? And then how did she change from the beginning of the story to the end? Well, we know he gave her enough freedom for her to be comfortable. He stayed with her, and in the end, they did get married. One of the comments that was suggested when we were talking about the book was the subject about the power imbalance between men and women in the 1930s, which is when this is supposed to have happened. Men viewed women as beneath them, and the main characters in this book managed somehow to rise above that. There are some subplots about the mines and the slurry dam, and one of the questions suggested were you engaged in that storyline? I was not particularly. I was not surprised. I expected it. I was surprised that they did take responsibility for it. That was a little bit surprising to me. The other thing that was a fairly big part of this book had to do with Marjorie going to jail for the murder of Clem McCullough. And how did you like that ending? When the daughter ends up testifying for Marjorie and getting her out of jail. She was obviously but had a baby that was a product of incest with her father, these people out in the hills. At any rate, these were some of the things that would have been part of an actual discussion had we been face to face. I'm not sure if this is helpful to anybody or interesting. If you read the book, I'm sure you have your own opinions about it. If you didn't read the book, I found it interesting. JoJo Moyes is well thought of. She's published a couple of books that people like a lot, and this is current. So I'm going to leave the discussion of this book at this point. If you email me, I will send you the link to the article about the conflict over the plagiarism in this book that I saw. There was also a short YouTube video about the Packhorse Library with the actual history of it. And if you are a searcher on the internet for information, you might want to look up the Kentucky Packhorse Librarians. Let's see if I've said that right. The Packhorse Librarians of Kentucky. That's pretty interesting to look up. Before I sign off of this video, I would like to give you a little bit of information about how to borrow books if you don't want the book in your hand. There is an app, Libby by Overdrive, for ebooks and audiobooks, and this app will allow you to borrow books from the library. They don't stay on your device forever. You borrow them and they disappear after a certain length of time. I will be sure that this information is available where you can pick it up. There is another app, Hoopla digital app, and that's for ebooks, audiobooks, TV and movies, and music, and that's always available. It has as many books as Overdrive, but fewer major titles and bestsellers. It's compatible with an iPhone, an iPad, a Fire tablet, which many of us were given when we moved in here, Alexa, and some TVs. I'll leave the information for both of these where you can pick them up in the information center. I assume that's still going to be operational. Thank you all for joining us. Next time, we'll see you at the bar.